Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin O'Brien, and this is the Why Our World interview series. In this series of interviews, we are interviewing our users from all over the world and getting their lived experience and their insights and their learning about their journey in the R community. Today, we are joined by Emmanuel, and Emmanuel is joining us from Eswatini. Eswatini is a country in southern Africa, right beside South Africa and Mozambique. So, hello there, Emmanuel. Tell us all about
Hi,
yourself.
tell us all about.
Tell us all about you.
Great. Thank you, Kelvin. Thank you for the opportunity to share with the audience about myself. So I'm Emmanuel Olamijuwon, and I'm a Pan-African young scientist. And Pan-African because I'm from Nigeria and I'm doing my PhD at the University of Witwatersrand. And I'm here in Eswatini because I used to be a lecturer in the Department of Statistics and Demography at the University of Eswatini. And we actually call the University of Choice in Africa. And I'll be joining the university, the School of Geography and Sustainable Development at the University of St. Andrews. I'm an R user. I started to use R if I still remember correctly, I began to use R towards the end of 2017 at a workshop for social media and big data. And subsequently, I started to learn R on my own from May. And since then, I also joined okay, I should also mention that I joined our mother chapter, which is the R Ladies in Johannesburg, and that has been our kind of springboard to the creation or establishment of the Eswatini User Group. And yeah, here we are today.
Great stuff. Tell us all about Eswatini. Now, I just give a sort of rough indication of where Eswatini is. But
Great.
people might not know it. It was formerly known as Swaziland up until about 2 or 3 years ago. But even still, I don't think people would know about it. So tell us all, give us a little bit of a geography lesson about Eswatini.
Great. So Eswatini is, like you mentioned, it used to be Swaziland until recently that it was changed to Eswatini. And Eswatini is basically the local translation for Swaziland. So it's the land of Swazis. And it was changed to Eswatini because there's a lot of confusion about Switzerland and Swaziland. So when you travel out of the country, maybe to Europe or maybe to Germany, for example, and people ask you, where are you from? And you say you're from Swaziland. They're like, oh yeah, Switzerland. So there's a lot of confusion about that. And so the name was changed to Eswatini. And Eswatini is a small landlocked country in Southern Africa. It's inside of South Africa, kind of. So it's the South African map, and then there's a small Eswatini inside of South Africa. It's about 3 hours drive to the major city in South Africa, Johannesburg. It's surrounded by small countries. I mean, it also has links to other cities in South Africa, like KwaZulu-Natal, also Mozambique, which is also another small country. Yeah, and we have a small population, which is also growing slowly. It's about 1.1 million as at the last census. It's a very small country. We have about 4 regions, 4 regions or provinces, like you would say, maybe in some other countries, 4 regions. Two of them are most developed. I feel like they are kind of equally distributed in terms of wealth and resources. So we have two which are extremely wealthy and like the metropolitan kind of city, well developed, but we also have the ones that like the rural community. We have one of the most developed university in Africa. We call it the University of Choice in Africa. It's the University of Eswatini, and that's where I used to work up until March last year. March last year. Yeah, I think that's it that I can say. And we also have a very rich culture in Eswatini. We have this cultural festival. It's called Umklanga, and there's also this festival. It's called the Bushfire Festival. It attracts audiences, musicians, a lot of tourists from all over the world. I understand that almost every year. It used to be almost every year. And then there's also the cultural. So we have the one that's more new age kind of festival, right? And then we also have the cultural festival, which is more like the cultural one for Eswatini culture.
I've seen photos of Swaziland. I looked at some photographs and it looks
Yeah,
absolutely
that's Eswatini right behind me. It's the bright one and sparkling.
good stuff. Now, so you were in university, or so you're doing a PhD in Witwatersrand. Is that the name of the place? That's in Johannesburg.
Yes, I'm doing my PhD in demography at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg.
So okay, so that's how do you travel? Do you commute from Johannesburg to Eswatini, or is it?
Yeah, that's so I reside mostly in Eswatini. I spend most of my time in Eswatini because I work in Eswatini. But when I have to do or maybe consult with my supervisor or have a chat or maybe
Yeah.
attend seminars, then I travel to Johannesburg or maybe even sometimes for our meetings with our ladies. So that's when I go to Johannesburg.
Good stuff. Now, tell us about the R User Group in Eswatini. You mentioned that there, that, you know. So tell us all about that. And tell us about the R community in Eswatini.
Okay, so we started the R community in Eswatini. If I still remember, towards the end of 2018, and that engagement started from Our Ladies. I was joining Our Ladies, and I think from the register, I'm not sure, but I think the batch picked it up from the register that I'm from Eswatini, and then we had a chat, and she's like, "Oh, you used to come from Eswatini. Why don't you start one in Eswatini?" So we started that discussion. I shared the idea with my colleagues in the department, Dr. Chimaka, and he also liked the idea and he said, "Oh yeah, let's begin the group." And we began the group, the two of us, and with a few students on the organization team. And that's how we started. And subsequently, Nonsekelelo and a few other persons joined. I think this year we've also had two persons join the organizing team. We've been organizing our meetings. We've only had a few of them. I mean, 2018 to the start of the pandemic has not been so far. So we've only had a few our meetings. In terms of the R community, most of our audiences are quite, I think, they are quite young in terms of the use of R. So for us, it's not for us. We are not a community of R users. I would say we're a community of people who want to use R and see how they can use it right in their research or area of expertise. What I understand is that most Department of Ed has been using Excel, some using Stata. So for us, and okay, another thing is that my interest in R began from my work in the NGO. So I used to work with this non-governmental organization, and we used to do trainings for the Ministry of Health. And there was one time when we had to do this training, and I submitted a quotation for licenses for a statistical package. And they said, no, this is too much. If there's a software that is free, why should we then pay this much for this? And then I said, but I don't know how to use this software. And they said, yeah, but then we can get someone. So for me, it's like my job was on the line. So that's when I started to develop this interest in R. And that's the same idea that I pitched to some of those who are now members of the user group. And maybe others also have their own interest in why they join the group. So the group has been growing. We have a few persons from Department of Economics. Most of our audiences are students. And we try to focus mostly on students because I think it's easier to build students and build them to the professional level with hopes that they also become expert and share this knowledge around with their own colleagues. And I think Nonsekelo is doing a great job on that in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah, she's another member of the R User Group, and we've actually interviewed her already, and we're very delighted for her being the first person to take part in one of these interviews, which is groundbreaking. Tell me about your career journey. So you're not you didn't start out as a data scientist, as you said. Like, so tell us about your career journey and when you discovered R. I mean, you mentioned it already, but let's have the full story.
Right, so I'm a full-fledged demography, full-fledged because I did my bachelor's in demography at the Joseph Ayo Babalola University in Nigeria, and then I moved on to South Africa to do my honors and master's in demography. And I mean, during master's program, we were introduced to Stata, so I'm also proficient with the use of Stata, so that's what I was using in my job as a data analyst. And then I joined the University of Eswatini, but at the University of Eswatini, my job does not really require the use of any statistical packages. I was teaching demographic methods, and some of those are the things that I presented. You can do those with Excel, but we're starting to use R for those calculations. But when I wanted to enroll for my PhD, I was looking for areas of interest. What would be the most interesting thing? I've worked a lot with surveys, but I don't want to do that again. I feel like I've done too much with surveys. So I saw this workshop about using big data from Twitter and Facebook. And for that workshop, there was also another aspect that had something about introduction to R. So I registered for that workshop. And that was my first time seeing the R interface. And it was strange because there were like 4 panels, one panel, like I could see so many things. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. But it was a day workshop, so I couldn't really do so much. And you can imagine it's not really a detailed kind of training. And then in the following year, there was also a similar workshop, which was the Summer Institute for Computational Social Science. And part of the workshop was that we need to learn how to use R before we arrive at the venue. So we were using a web interface for that. And so we were learning online. I was learning online, practicing. I had a small diary. It's just that I didn't know I was going to talk about it. So otherwise, I would have shown you my diary of R code. So I had that diary where I wrote my lines of code, and yeah, that became my first step. And I also remember that I had a colleague in that workshop who had used R before, and so she had a well-prepared R code, and she shared that with me. So that also was easy for me, so I could adapt. So I would read. If there were errors, I would go to Stack Overflow and fix the errors. And yeah, I continued like that. And later uh, I found out first about our ladies, and then I found out about our user group in Johannesburg. So I also joined those. I enjoyed the talks. I find myself traveling from Eswatini to Johannesburg. Sometimes I would ask myself after the trip to say, why would you travel like 4 hours and 4 hours, 8 hours for 2 hours workshop? But most times they are very exciting and you get to meet people. And I find it very interesting. And also now sharing my own experiences with colleagues in the user group. And now I think we have, I'm living in Eswatini, but I think one thing that we have learned, I'm not worried about the continuity of the group. I mean, we have a very strong leadership team. Nantikelo and my colleague, Dr. Chimaka, are doing a great job. So it's not really a concern for me, but I also understand that one thing that I've learned from this COVID pandemic is that we can always organize workshops remotely. So if I still want to treat, I don't see myself leaving Eswatini user. I think I'm still a part of this group, and I'll always remain an Eswatini user. So yeah, and here I am now. I'm joining St. Andrews University, University of St. Andrews as a research fellow, mostly for the quantity aspect, and I'll be using R mostly for that. And yeah, so that's me.
Good stuff. Tell me what was like actually just learning R for the first time. Were you on your own, or like what was your first impressions of it? You mentioned there that you sort of gravitated toward Our Ladies and the R User Group. What was the sort of process like at the start? Like, were you very anxious about it? Like, anyone to share with? What was that like?
No, I wasn't anxious. I was looking for like I think okay. The thing is that I like to use computers, so I'm not really anxious about
Okay.
using code or anything. Because I'm also used to coding in Stata, right? So I have a
Okay.
background. Yeah. So, but the thing is that for me, R was a little bit entirely different because you can open multiple data sets. Well, I know that people also try to do something similar in Stata where you read data into memory, but for me, it was easier. Like you can open multiple data sets in R, and but what was most fascinating to me first was that I could read Twitter data into R. That was where my interest in R began. And I think that's why I'm even learning to use R, because that's what I'm doing now. So in my PhD, I'm looking at opportunities for using social media data to improve sexual and reproductive health among young people. So I'm using data from Facebook groups. So from that workshop and learning how to use R for using R tweets in R to stream data from Twitter, and I got that inspiration from my project. And even though I'm not using it for Twitter, I'm using it for Facebook. So that's where the interest regarding R use began for me.
Good stuff. So you gave a presentation for YR on the coverage DB R package or data set. Just tell us a little bit about that. Just in case anyone has not seen that presentation, they're only seeing this interview.
Yeah,
Just
thank
give
you.
us a recap of that presentation.
Yeah, thank you. So the coverage DB, and actually the name itself, so it's coverage, which is COVID-19 age, because it focuses on age distribution. So it's coverage DB database. So it's an international database that includes age, sex distribution of confirmed cases and deaths across the world. It includes over 60 volunteers, international volunteers. So we have people collecting this data all over the world. I have one of my colleagues who is collecting for Eswatini. I'm currently collecting for Rwanda. So we've got people like that all over the world who are coordinating for different countries for this data set. I know that a few countries that publish data on age distribution of tests, we also collect that. I'm also starting to see that Eswatini has started publishing data on vaccination. So we will also begin to collect that. And the reason for this is because we want to see to what extent age composition of a population explain variations in this fatality rate across countries, or even generate other forms of insights. And so the coverage, the COVID age R package is it's a subset of the bigger project, right? So the COVID package is for people to be able to read the data into R. So what you see is that, I mean, because this database includes data for a lot of countries, it might be difficult to read the entire database into R. So what one of our colleagues did was to write a package where you can download the data set and then read only a subset of them into memory in R so that you don't consume too much memory. So you can read a subset of them into R to do any analysis that you want to do. So that's what the package is all about. I know that there are also efforts to incorporate other aspects into the package, maybe even doing something that I presented now, instead of maybe for someone who is not used to indirect methods, for example, maybe we can just write a function such that you can see to say if Eswatini had the same structure as this country, what would have happened, right? So that's something, so the package is still in development. I understand that the developer is open to contribution from the bigger community. So if anyone is interested, you can always send an email to the developer. Yeah.
The main developer is Tim Ristra, is that correct?
No, so Tim Rife is the coordinator for the coverage DB. Estrom, if I pronounce the name correctly, Estrom, but I can find it again. So Estrom is the one who is coordinating for COVID package.
Okay. Good
I think it's Estrom. Yeah.
So just actually out of curiosity, what sort of R packages would you generally work with in your line of work for demography, let's say, for when you were working with this coverage DB data set? Presumably tidyverse packages, but what else were you working with? What was your workflow like?
Well, for this COVID, I would say first the COVID package itself, because I have to download the data. What else do I use? Well, there's tidyverse. There's for graphs, maybe Gpub R. There's Carbon Extra, which I like to use for formatting tables. In other aspect of my work where I do regression model, I use Stargazer. Yeah, and then there's also a package survey package for working with survey data sets.
Yeah,
it allows you to weight survey data set. I mean, especially those at the individual level. Those are the ones that I use mostly. The rest, I think most times I write my functions, but yeah, I think tidyverse kind of helps me the most. It's the most consistent one that I've always been using. Yeah.
good stuff. Tell me, so the presentation was about the COVID crisis, and specifically looking at Eswatini. How has the COVID crisis been for you and your colleagues? So this recording is in early April 2021. So we're about 1 year into this crisis.
Yeah, it's been devastating, I would say. So I resigned from the University of Eswatini because I was supposed to go for a research visit at the Max Planck Institute I was supposed to start in April. So in 2019, I received the Green Talent Award by Germany's Federal Ministry of Education and Research. So that award provides me the opportunity to visit the Max Planck Institute for a research visit sponsored by Germany, the government of Germany. So I had planned to go for that visit in April, and I applied for my visa. And I think a week after I applied, it was a week after I applied for my visa, that was when the lockdown began. So there was the full lockdown. It was impossible to leave Eswatini or even leave South Africa. So at first, my research stay was postponed. It was postponed indefinitely, and I had the opportunity to return to the university. The university was open to me coming back, but I was reluctant. I thought the pandemic would be over in July, so I'm like, no, I'll stay. I can manage until July, and I'll leave in July. And then July came. It was impossible to leave. Then again, they extended an offer to me again to say, Emmanuel, we think you should join the university back. This is not going to end anytime soon. And I'm like, but it's looking promising. The cases are going low. I think September will be fine. And then by August, my head of department called me again, and then it's like, it's not looking like this is going to end. We think you should join the department again. And then we resolved to say, okay, I'll take the position, but on a part-time basis. So I'll take this position on a part-time basis so that when it's possible to travel, then it will be easy for me to leave. And I did that for 3 months, thinking that the pandemic would be over, and it never did. So, and that was how, and that was how I left. So at the university on that note, based on the pandemic. And I also couldn't travel to Germany because of that. And even till now, it's still impossible for me to go to Germany because my sponsor prefers that I work from the lab rather than working remotely. So why travel to Germany to work remotely when I can also do that in Eswatini remotely? So, and that's when I started to look for other opportunities because it's not good to be idle. I want to work. So then I applied and I got the offer to join the University of St. Andrews. So that's my own little story. But I also understand that people also have their own experiences. There are uh, a lot of experiences about how the pandemic have affected people's lives in livelihood. I know that it has affected employment, especially. I mean, I think mine is a voluntary resignation. I can't say that the pandemic really, even though it does, but I feel like I resigned on my own. But I also know a few people who were, I mean, because one aspect of the pandemic was that all alcohols were banned, the sale of alcohols was banned. So it was also impossible to produce alcohol. So I had a neighbor who was working in that sector. And at first they had a pay cut, paying about 10%, and subsequently they couldn't pay again. So he had to leave the job. So, and I know a lot of that. I mean, there are a lot of that. I mean, around. There are also colleagues whose contracts were expiring and could not be renewed because of the pandemic. There are also implications for health and well-being, experiences of intimate partner violence, maybe couples getting tired of seeing each other too often. Yeah, so I think it's been devastating, but I think in all of that, the good thing is that everyone is still we are still able to talk about these experiences and look back and yeah, and still be able to share these experiences. And in as much as we experience so much, I think it's still good that we are still able to talk about them and laugh at them in some way.
Good stuff. Thanks for that. Just actually a question that comes up as something that you sort of mentioned there about visas, and this is a question that has arisen a lot for African R users. The question of visas and travel. How is that like? How has that been a factor in your own career? Like traveling to
Visas.
Europe.
Well, it's been tricky, but I don't think I've really experienced the worst. Uh, well, yeah, I haven't really experienced the worst. I only got a rejection once when I applied for the US visa, and that was in 2019. But I kind of reasoned with the reason for my rejection. So I moved to Eswatini in 2017, and I applied for the visa in I think in February, and I had just joined the university in January. So me applying for a visa to the United States. So the consulate explained to me that it thinks that I might not return because I've only spent about 7 months or 10 months in Eswatini. So I don't have strong ties to
Okay.
Eswatini. Yeah, but again, I reapplied in 2020 and I got the visa in 2020. I've
Yeah.
also got visas for Schengen countries, and I also have. I mean, my visa for Germany was approved, and I've also got visa for UK. I don't think I've really had a lot of negative experiences, or maybe because I've had a lot of travel within African countries. Maybe that helps. I'm not sure, but
I know.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a sort of it's a source of perpetual frustration for many in the R community in Africa. Another question actually that arises is internet access and internet connectivity. Has that been a challenge for you in Eswatini?
Yeah, that has been a big challenge. So as you may have noticed in our user group, we have not been able to have meetups compared to what you would have seen in other countries where they've moved to virtual meetups. And the challenge for us is the internet connectivity. It's quite expensive for an average person. And also bearing in mind that I mean, our interest, we can get professionals to attend these meetings, but our core interests are the students for the user group. So we want students to be able to attend. And I think there is, again, so we're proceeding with meetups. I mean, doing an introduction to art today, knowing that the core audience are not there means that we still have to do this again in March, we still do it again in April, thinking that the pandemic will be over, but never does. So that has been a challenge for us. We've not been able to have meetups because of that. It also affects meetings. Internet is easily accessible for those who can afford it, but again, not everyone can
Yeah.
afford internet. Yeah. And even when it's available, sometimes it's not that strong. It also flickers depending
Yeah.
on area. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a sort of a hopefully that it will. It seems to me now the key the key obstacle for many countries around the world being participating more in the R community. Quick question, really, or just actually tell us about where you'd like to see yourself going over the next few years as an R user.
Wow. So in the next few years, I think my ultimate interest is to uh, develop a package that will be interesting for demographers or population scientists. I haven't really decided on what that will be. I've been thinking about it. Sometimes you get a nice idea, you check on Google, you see that it's already there, someone has already done it. But I think that's my bigger interest to see how I can contribute to package development. Also, maybe building capacity. I think that's also one strong thing for me, and that's also something that's been very close to my heart, doing workshops in R, training people on R, yeah, facilitating workshops. I think that's the core interest for me, facilitating workshops and contributing to package development. And also now I'm also starting to try reproducibility, and I think that is in line with building capacity. A lot of people want to learn how to do things. And I think, like I mentioned, one thing that helped me with my own use of R is that someone gave me a markdown file that was already prepared and with the data already available. And I could run with that, improve that, and adapt that to my own work. So that's also something that I'm also starting to do. Even though I know that my codes may not be entirely correct, even though it's validated by a lot of people, but I want to share that as much as possible with the public and hope that it helps somebody out there. And if they find errors, they can always let me know and I'll fix that.
Yeah, good stuff. And what about the Eswatini R User Group and general, the Southern African R user community in general?
Yeah, I would love to see Eswatini user grow, grow to the point where we also have like very strong talks, engagement in our conferences. I would
Yeah.
like to see a lot of our Eswatini user presentations at our conferences. I know that Lonsikelo also talked about starting our ladies group. I think that will be something interesting. In our user group, there's not a lot of women. I'm not sure how that is driven by gender in the leadership team, but I mean, now we have two ladies in the leadership team, but I hope that maybe with an Our Ladies group, maybe they will be able to attract, or we will be able to attract more women or increase diversity in the user group. I think that's one interesting thing for me for the user group. I would love to see more presentations, more interesting ideas from Eswatini user and see how we can adapt, I mean, our diversity and our cultural heritage, yeah, and bring all of that to the user community in general.
Good stuff. I think we'll leave it there. Actually, well, that was a great interview. Hopefully, we'll be seeing you again soon. Particularly when you go up to Scotland, you'll be much closer to me. I'm in Ireland, and
Wow.
that the Eswatini R User Group will thrive into the future. Folks, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Emmanuel.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
Great stuff. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording now.